Welcome back to the GCC Podcast powered by Gateway, where we bring together the voices shaping the future of global capability centers in India and beyond. I'm your host, Suchita Vishnoi, and today we're joined by a seasoned GCC leader whose journey reflects the evolution of India's GCC ecosystem from execution focused centers to strategic people first centers of excellence. Our guest today is Srinivas Sampath, GCC Leader, Board Advisor, and 2025 GCC Leader of the Year for R&D and Site Leadership. He currently serves as Vice President R&D and Site Leader at Upland Software India, where he has built and scaled the India Global Capability Center from the ground up into a high-performing remote-first organization with strong culture, ownership, and global impact. With over 28 years of experience, Srinivas has played a pivotal role in designing, building, and scaling high-impact GCCs, driving product ownership, engineering excellence, and people-first leadership. His journey is a powerful reflection of how India's GCCs are no longer just supporting global enterprises, but shaping global strategy, innovation, and business outcomes. Before we dive in, let's start with a big picture. And, over the years, the GCC landscape has gone through a massive transformation from operational support hubs to centers of innovation and strategic impact. Srinivas, you witnessed this evolution up and close, building and scaling global operations yourself. And we were just talking a while ago on how your association with Upland started. As I start asking you a few questions, you can reflect back on your journey and, throw up insights that you've gathered over the years. Are you ready and can
Absolutely.
I get started? So thank you
Absolutely,
so much.
Suchita.
Thank
Thank
you
you
and
for having
welcome
me.
again.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thank you
again.
for having me on the podcast.
Thank you. So I'll just put an industry lens and talk more about what's the big change and the shift that's happening. So for years, like we know, GCCs are seen primarily as execution arm, and today leaders like you are building credibility engines where India owns outcomes and not just output, right? So what do global leaders still underestimate about India GCCs, and what mindset shift is absolutely non-negotiable if they want their GCC to become a true strategic partner?
Great. I think that's a fantastic question, Suchita, to set the context for this session,
Thank you.
because I think it's very important for every single GCC leader to consider what are some of the areas that are very key for them not to overlook so that their GCC becomes a very strategic partner. I think the ultimate goal for a GCC will be to function as a digital twin to its headquarters, primarily mirroring functions and contributing value. But if I look at what could be some of the three, four things that, both the global leader and the local leaders should not overlook, I'll probably take three or four of them in the interest of time. So the first one would be what I would call as the velocity of value realization, right?
Okay.
What this means is building a GCC today is a very well defined machine, right? And as a leader, one should not underestimate the power of the ecosystem and operate in a very legacy timeline model. I think today headquarters are looking for very quick value realization, and they will definitely rely on the GCC leader to suggest the way forward. So models like GCC as a service, BOT, and whatnot will definitely help in a faster value realization. So definitely don't overlook the speed at which you can build a GCC, right, and get value from it.
Yes.
The second one is what I call as underestimating the cost of accommodating. And this is something that almost every GCC goes through. And I've heard this in many conversations where the team primarily ends up focusing on exactly what the HQ wants, right? Even if it means it's suboptimal. I think in the early days, this is good because for the global team, it's a new experience. And having somebody who understands and executes exactly what is required builds the required trust and goodwill. But I think
Yes.
over time, if it is repeated again and again, it can delay the strategic relevance of the center. So at some point of time, the GCC leader has to play the key role of having to move the center forward and stop accommodating. Basically, challenge what is happening today and take the center forward. Right. This is something that both sides have to agree on and move at a faster pace. So that's a second one, right? Never underestimate the cost of accommodating work. The third thing I think is pretty important and off late has taken a lot of center stage is the leadership pipeline, right? Now, most of the time today, if you talk to GCC leaders, the common comment you hear is decision making power is often gated by the geography or there is a perceived customer proximity, right? And
Yes.
what this means is India leaders most often than not end up in administrative roles. I think this is where the GCC leader and the global leaders have an opportunity to shape the global
Yes.
roles from the local center and ensure that they have a seat at the table. Now, this is easier said than done. It's very easy to ask for it, but extremely difficult because not only do you need credibility, you
Yes.
also need to be a subject matter expert, right? And that is something that many GCCs won't pick up on day one. So it's a systematic knowledge transfer and knowledge acquisition that needs to happen. I would say the third one, where it's all about the leadership pipeline. Never underestimate what you can do.
Mm.
The fourth one is focusing on outcomes. And I
Okay.
think this is also related to the leadership topic that we just spoke about. Traditionally, we are always used to measuring effort rather than business impact. But
Yes.
today, when you look at how GCCs are structured, where somebody like Upland, right, we are fully remote, right? I mean, there's no way I can check on somebody, right? Rather,
Yes.
I would focus a lot more on outcome. And with many GCCs following a hybrid model, this also becomes a lot more important. So focus on outcomes, focus on what is expected to be done and business impact versus just effort and the hours that are being spent.
Yes.
The last one I would say on what not to overlook is the one team mindset. And this is all about culture because
Yes.
many times culture ends up getting treated as a soft requirement rather than a core differentiator. And this requires that the GCC leader and the global leader play what I call as a one team mindset, where the India hub should be culturally integrated into the global fabric, right? For this, it requires a lot of transparent communication, activating a localized EVP while the global team might have their own value proposition. Some of them may not work in the local context. So, making sure that you have a local representation of that and jointly celebrating success. What you don't want is an us versus them culture, right? This is end of the day a one team. So building that, I think, is one of the main things that a leader should not overlook. Now,
Okay.
to your second part of the question, which is what is that one single mindset shift that needs to
Yes.
happen? I think the question that the GCC leader or the global leader or the global HQ that is looking to set up a GCC, what they should ask is not what India can do, but what India can lead, right?
Okay.
Being a strategic part of the global structure does not come from just having a seat at the table. I think you need to also have good questions that you can ask at the table. That's when
Yes.
you start creating impact. So that would be my take.
Thank you. Your response was so potent because you covered a lot of aspects from speed to timeline, also the outcome based model that you spoke about. You touched upon leadership, on culture, which is what I have in mind next for you because you're talking about building scale without losing the soul, right? Saying how does India differentiate from the rest of the world and how do we cater and lead, right? How should India
Right.
then just support? So you've really scaled, and I'm moving to the next one. That's you've scaled GCCs with both strong metrics and strong culture, something many believe is a trade off, right? Because they say
Mm-hmm.
you can't sustain the culture and the metrics. So you've been able to do that, and you're looking at growing numbers. We were just talking about how you're looking at growing numbers as well. When organizations scale rapidly, what are the subtle leadership mistakes that quietly erode the trust and ownership we were talking about earlier? And what practices have helped you protect people first culture when these complexities increase? This is a flip to the first question. So
Absolutely. And I think they go hand in hand because on one end, we talked about what do you need to be strategic. But at the
yes.
same time, rapid scaling can also create a paradox, right? Where the very system that you design to manage growth can end up stifling the spirit of the organization, right? So, so when we expand at high velocity, it's very easy to slip into some very subtle mistakes, right? And go back to some areas that can actually pull you down. So some of the things that I've seen, which I've consciously worked upon to make sure that I don't repeat, it is one, replacing context with control, right?
Okay.
So as teams grow, the general tendency is leaders often compensate for that lost visibility by adding layers of approvals, reviews, reporting, meetings, and whatnot. Right. I feel this signals a level of mistrust, right? Where even when the intent is for risk management, it's to be able to understand that presence does not mean everything, right? I mean, you should be
Okay.
comfortable with making sure that you have a team that can execute and run and manage the things, right? So that is something that a leader can definitely look to avoid. Second is scaling your processes faster than sharing the meaning behind them,
Okay.
right? Now processes will scale very quickly, but culture doesn't, right? People take time to understand and absorb a change. So when a new leader introduces a new framework or a tool or a metric without really explaining why it is being done, teams will just comply without commitment, right? And over time people will just think that it's a ritual, which will then just erode the psychological ownership and turn culture into a ceremony, right? Then it just becomes a writing on the wall, right? It's not something that you observe in people, right? Culture is something.
Yes.
End of the day, I define culture as the collective behaviors that you exhibit, and if that starts eroding, it doesn't get you where you need to be.
Yes.
The third one is over indexing on metrics at the expense of judgment. And while I think metrics are essential, when leaders start looking at them as proxies for trust, right?
Yes.
Teams will learn to manage the numbers, right? And that's not a good thing to do, because this will subtly shift the behavior from accountability to defensiveness, right?
Looking good.
Organization appears to be data driven, but
Yes.
the quality of decisions will quickly deteriorate because judgment is no longer valued. You're just looking at numbers, right? And that's not going to help when you're looking at scaling. And the last one I would say is letting speed justify silence. Now, in a fast growing environment, leaders usually delay difficult conversations in the name of momentum. And this can definitely create ambiguity about priorities, standards, where this organization is going, values, and whatnot. And people are fantastic at filling gaps with assumptions.
Yes.
Right. And trust will quickly erode, not from a bad intent, but from lack of clarity.
Yes.
So I feel these are the four things that I've repeatedly seen that can be avoided when you scale. And looking at my own journey, when I looked at across the different GCCs that I worked with, one of the things that I've consistently done is one, making sure that I set the context, right? You have to always explain the why and making sure that there is buy-in. Sometimes people may not buy in, but at least they know the why, right? So there is definitely that context setting that happens. Second, making ownership very explicit. People have to clearly understand what they own and what they do not own. And clearly having them understand how they operate will help reduce a lot of ambiguity. Otherwise, it's always finger pointing and things just don't move, right? You're just caught in this analysis paralysis model. The third one is building a local EVP. We spoke about it in the first question, where it's very crucial if you want to attract the right talent. And culture in India is very different than what the global culture might be. So you always have to take the global EVP and localize it for the GCC that you're running. And the last one is index on open communication. This again goes back to the point that I said in the first question, where with remote only GCCs, hybrid GCCs, without the right amount of communication, again, people lose clarity. And focusing on outcomes and not doing micromanagement is very important, especially when you're in the kind of operating model that we are in.
Yes.
So that would be my, I should say, top level advice on this question that you had.
This was a tough question, I'll be honest. And you've been very candid in your responses. I loved all your responses. And what a true leader should actually avoid is what you covered. So thank you. We'll now shift gears and we'll do a future forward, just to understand there's so much happening with AI, agentic systems, remote first models, redefining how teams will work. And the role of a GCC leader is evolving very fast. They're literally in the spotlight right now. We all know
Right.
that. So, if you were advising a first time GCC site leader today, what capabilities should they start unlearning, and what entirely new leadership muscle will help define success for them, given that they have to operate in the next 5 years, which is going to be extremely challenging given the new technology wave that's touching all capability centers right now?
Right. Right. I mean, I really love this question because you're not asking what skills leaders need to add, but what skills leaders need to unlearn. And that's
Unlearn.
usually the tough part, right? Because these are skills that have grown along with them over time, and unlearning them is a little bit of a journey, right? And it
Yes.
requires a little bit of practice, right? So one of some of the advice that I would give to a first time leader is one, unlearn that presence equals leadership, right? I think we just touched upon the ways in which GCCs can operate remote first, hybrid, and add to it AI augmented world. Visibility is no longer, I think, created by being in the room, right? Or whether you're running meetings or reviewing everything personally.
Yes.
So leaders who equate presence with impact will over involve themselves in everything and slow the things down, right?
Okay.
So influence should now come from clarity and quality of decisions, not physical presence. So that's definitely one thing that a new leader has to definitely think about. The second one is something that I also personally advise a lot of people is learn to slow down, right?
Okay.
Often
Yes.
the first time GCC leader I've seen, they go
They
in
want
with
to do
all
every.
guns.
Yes.
Yeah, they go with all guns blazing and want to change the world, right?
Yeah.
But they will be very surprised when the HQ is not responding at the same pace, right?
Yeah.
So this can definitely lead to frustration and questioning your own choice, right? I mean, did I make the right choice?
And exhaustion, right? And
Right.
exhaustion
Exactly.
kills productivity.
Absolutely. So rather, the solution is slow down, observe, document, prioritize, and then act. Have your own charter that you know that you're observing a lot of things, but not everything needs to be changed right now, right? So if you follow that practice of slowing down, I think it'll definitely help a new leader to tackle the most pressing issues and definitely buy trust and definitely
Okay.
get that buy-in that's absolutely required. So that's the second one. The third one is this is very interesting because I think this is a big shift that we have seen in the GCC marketplace where headcount is not a proxy for success anymore, right? For years, scale was the biggest scorecard. Bigger teams meant bigger mandates, bigger ownership,
Yeah.
bigger accountability.
Bigger budgets. Yes.
Absolutely. But that mental model now breaks because we are now living in an AI enabled environment where, AI is a constant companion and that can take over many positions that you feel you might have
Yes.
needed in the past. So leaders who still optimize for growth in people rather than growth in outcomes will struggle to justify the relevance of the GCC and their own relevance, right? Because you're not up to date on how technology is evolving. So
Yeah.
success in my mind should be measured by your leverage, not by the size of the GCC, right? So that's the third thing that we should look at. The fourth one is excellence alone is not enough, right? Execution is definitely important, but is no longer the differentiating factor. So leaders who don't move up the value chain into problem solving, trade off, outcome ownership, and whatnot will find that their centers are getting commoditized, right? You'll end up doing very basic work, right? And not move up the value chain. So don't just focus only on excellence, try to kind of move up the value chain. And the last one I would say is unlearn the fact that clarity should have a precedence over action. I think today we all know that the future is ambiguous. We don't know what's going to happen 24 hours from now.
Yeah.
Somewhere I read a very interesting quote that said that by the time you understand a technology, by the time you've read up about it, the relevance of the technology is already gone.
Changed. Yes.
So don't wait for clarity all the time, right? I think sometimes you just need to learn to move forward with incomplete information and be in a position to course
And
correct
figure out.
rapidly.
Yes.
So be adaptable. That's what I mean by that. Now, like I said, unlearning habits is usually the most difficult part. But by having an awareness and practice, I think it's definitely a habit that can be built by many of the new leaders that we see coming in. Now, what would be the skills that they have to pick up in the next 5 years? Honestly, I think 5 years is a long time. right? Given the rate at which things are changing, I
Take.
think if you look at what would be required in the next 2 to 3 years, the first thing I would say is orchestrating humans and AI, right?
Okay. Okay.
This, in my opinion, is going to be the single most new skill that will be needed,
Yes.
because GCC leaders must learn to design teams where humans and AI agents work together. AI is going to be a
Together. Yeah.
permanent participant, right? This means understanding where to automate, understanding where you need humans, and how to
Mm,
govern AI responsibly. So that's a big
mm,
thing, orchestrating this human AI integration. The second thing is ecosystem leadership, right?
mm,
Today we are seeing so many platforms, including what we are going through right now, where
yes.
there are a lot of networks and a lot of peer ecosystems where one can learn about what's happening around them in the GCC space,
Mm,
right? So the ability to learn, absorb, and contribute back to the ecosystem becomes a very strategic advantage for a new leader, right?
mm,
And the third is culture building. So we spoke about culture earlier as well. So culture is no
yes.
longer a nice to have, right? To me, it's the underlying infrastructure for a company,
Mm,
right? And they have to leaders must look at a mechanism to build that one team mindset, right? That we
yes.
spoke about. And lastly, given AI and all the new ambiguity that is coming in, a good understanding of regulatory and ethical stewardship is important, right? Leaders
Yeah.
must treat compliance and regulatory reputation as
Very.
strategic assets, right? With the DPDP Act and the some of the
Yes.
new changes that are coming with the labor codes and whatnot, compliance is non-negotiable, right?
Mm,
So leaders must be extremely careful when navigating this space and not get into any sort of a reputational issue, right? So that would be my four advice points on any new leader who's coming in.
yeah. Thank you so much. I think that was quite a lot. We covered what are new skills, what should one do in the changing environment, etc. Now, I'm moving to the more interesting part of this
Hmm.
podcast, which is our rapid fire round. I
Right.
have three questions to ask you, and there'll be short responses from your end. That's more to know you as a person.
Sure.
So my
Sure.
first question to you is, because we are starting this new year, what's your 2026 New Year resolution, if there is any? That's
Yes,
on top of
I do.
everyone's mind right now.
I do have a resolution, and it's not work related. I want to
Yes.
climb Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
So
So have you been trekking otherwise? Like,
yes, I'm a very avid trekker. I at least do
lovely.
one Himalayan trek every year. Both me and
Oh,
my wife
lovely.
are very avid trekkers. So this year I've put in a plan that I have to climb the largest or the highest freestanding mountain in the world, and that's a
Wow.
good record to look at. So Kilimanjaro it'll be.
That's lovely. And thank you for sharing that. And I do hope you'll put a post on LinkedIn
I
about,
will.
achieving this. This is great. Thank you for sharing, and wish you good luck on that. My
Thank you.
next one for you is, what's your weekend reset activity? What do you normally do over weekends to reset for the next week?
Yeah, three things. So one, like I said, both me and my wife love trekking. So if it's Saturday mornings, we try to find a place nearby that we can go and
Go
trek.
walk around.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is usually a three-fourth of the day activity. So Saturday predominantly goes in trekking.
Okay.
Both me and my wife again are also runners. We are long distance runners. So
Okay.
if it's not trekking, it's running in Bangalore. Although running in Bangalore is a little difficult with all
Yes.
the traffic and whatnot, but
Yes.
we still try, right? So that's the second thing that we do. The third is I love binge watching, right? So
Okay.
whatever I miss in terms of movies and whatnot, if I'm not doing either of the first two activities, I'm on the sofa watching Netflix movies, at least 4 to 5 movies over Saturday and Sunday. That's the
Oh,
reset
lovely.
button.
Yes. That good. So there's a lot of action as well as, you're static. So, while watching movies, so it's a lot of relaxed time as well
Absolutely.
as
And,
being in
and what I
nature.
also do is I share a snippet of my movie reviews in Facebook. So if people are
Oh,
following
okay.
me in Facebook,
Wow.
there's a critique review that I write. So I've got a
Okay.
lot of people saying, "Okay, I watched this movie because you said it's great."
Okay. So thank you for this response, because this takes me to the third question, which comes out of this response. So, which is the most recent binged watched, either on Netflix or any other OTT that you have critique on, and you actually advise a lot of us to watch that. If there's any series that you have in mind, anything recent or in the recent past.
I have to really think. There are multiple things that I watched actually over this weekend. But if I have to pick a movie that I think really worked well, which is something that I not watched now, but sometime in the past, is there's this movie called Air, which is about
Okay. Yes.
how the Nike Air deal was struck with Jordan, Michael Jordan, right? The reason
I've
why I'm also
heard.
saying that is it's a great movie on leadership lessons. How they negotiate that deal. That's
Okay.
a great movie, and I've told a lot of people to watch it, saying that if you want to learn how to negotiate, that's the movie you need to watch.
I've heard about it. I haven't watched it. I should, because it talks about how the leverage is over years, right? And how
Absolutely, and
it benefits.
how
Yes.
relentless they pursue,
Yes.
the athlete to make sure that they're getting that deal. So
Wow.
that's one. The second one, I mean, of course, if you want a more recent one, I love this movie Huck, which
Okay. Yes.
which I just
I've
saw
watched that.
recently.
Yes.
Again, a brilliant movie about the rights of women and how steadfastly she fights for it. Again,
Yes.
a great
Yes.
show of resilience. I
Very
think that's
inspiring.
another
Yes.
fantastic
Yes.
movie. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very different question on the podcast. The first time I've ever asked. So thank you for that.
no problem.
So, yes, so that was such an inspiring conversation full of perspective, experience, and a lot of wisdom, leadership wisdom, as well as practical ways of living life and enjoying your weekends too. So, Srinivas, thank you again for joining us on the GCC podcast and sharing insights on leadership, culture, and the evolving future of global capability centers. Your journey truly reflects what it takes to build GCCs that create lasting impact. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow the GCC podcast for more conversations with leaders shaping the next generation of global capability centers.